Hello, America and the world. This is Radio Free Market, and I am your guest host, Aaron Brown, sitting in today for Michael McKay. We are behind the lines of socialism, my friends, and Radio Free Market is the voice of free people and free markets. Our topic today is planned poverty, the gift of government intervention. I first want to welcome our special guest, Jeffrey Tucker. Hello, Mr. Tucker.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm honored to interview you. Mr. Tucker is the editorial vice president of the Ludwig von Mises Institute and the current webmaster for the Institute's website, Mises.org. Tucker is also an adjunct scholar with the McKinnock Center for Public Policy and an Acton University faculty member. He also wrote a book called Bourbon for Breakfast, which is an awesome book, and I highly recommend it. It's free on Mises.org, which again is MISES.org. So this show is based on the speech that Mr. Tucker gave at the Mises Institute called The Decivilizing Effects of Government. And you led off by talking about the difference between older socialists and new ones, saying that the old socialists argued for socialism because they believed, mistakenly or not, that socialism would bring about higher standards of living. For example, Marx wanted to relieve the conditions of the poor. The New Deal sought to improve the standards of living of the United States. Now, you say that modern socialists seem to want a lower standard of living and to use government intervention to bring it about. Can you elaborate on that?
It's almost a charming thing to read the old socialists because they didn't have any of what we associate with modern progressivist mentality. You know, they wanted progress. They wanted the world to be fed. They wanted technological development. You know, I mean, Lenin and Stalin wanted to electrify all of Russia. So, you know, I mean, they were in favor of industry. They favored socialism because they thought it would be good for the world. Of course, that didn't turn out to be true. It was exactly the opposite. It impoverished every place that tried it. But what's strange to me, and I can't say I entirely understand it. It's almost like socialism is a sort of a religion. Rather than give up socialism, it's as if the left changed its ideals. So now, and I think this has been true for several decades now, you get this kind of romance of poverty among the left, and it's a pervasive attitude. People wanting to sort of go back to nature and get rid of industrial society and grow your own vegetables and have a compost pile out back rather than using the local trash service or whatever the thing is. So I guess what I'm saying here, and these are all, to my mind, this longing for a kind of Rousseauian poverty where we're all kind of happy without material goods. It's very dangerous when it's instituted in a government policy, which it is, and it is bringing about poverty. So what I'm suggesting is that once the socialists saw what their policies actually bring about, they changed their goals. You know, rather than prosperity, the goal is now to make us all live with less.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good segue into the next, point is that you wrote that Rousseau kind of romanticized the idea of the hunter-gatherer society and local trade, and to me it kind of sounds like we'd be thrust back into the barter system. And our Radio Free Market listeners know that barter is extremely inefficient and would most likely lead to not even jokingly, would probably lead to mass death and an extreme decline in the standard of living of every single person on the planet.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the invention of money, which is a market innovation, it came about because it made exchange more efficient and allowed us to cooperate with ever more people in the division of labor. Money is nothing other than a kind of a proxy for goods and services that allows you to calculate profits and losses and make sense of your economic life. So it was a market innovation. But yes, I think you're right. I mean, many people on the left, sort of had this romantic attachment to the idea of barter and making your own stuff. And I've done some research on this thing because I can't entirely understand where this comes from, but there is many intellectuals out there and many political activists who really do think, they believe that.
I'm sorry to interrupt real quick. We're coming close to the end of this first segment. We will be back with Jeffrey Tucker on his article called The Decivilizing Effects of Government. Please stay with us. Hello, America and the world. We're back on Radio Free Market, and Jeffrey, I'm going to let you finish that thought on kind of the leftist romanticization of kind of hunter-gatherer society and lower standards of living.
Sure, there are many best-selling books on this topic. They imagine that the market economy or industrial society or modernity, as we understand it, is unsustainable. So it's all going to crash and burn, in the old Marxist fantasy that somehow capitalism is going to unwind and collapse. And so we have to, now look forward to a future of doing without, and they have elaborate schemes for how we're going to travel without cars and how we're all going to be growing our own vegetables, and our streets can be turned into planting
rain
fields.
Collectors, right?
Yeah, it's all just kind of insane. But and of course there are always crazy people in the world, and we understand that. But look, the problem here is that this point of view is being subtly written into the laws that are running our society. So, there's a whole host of ways in which government is kind of unraveling what the market is trying to unravel, what the market has created, and you see it in your daily lives, and your appliances in your home that don't work, and the toilets that don't flush well, and the water that's not running as well as it used to in your home. These are all consequence of government regulations. Not that people understand this, but it's just true. Every government regulation
and up to our listeners, you're going to love hearing about the examples Jeff gave about things like toilets, bed bugs, things like that. But before we get into that, some of when I was at Mises University, I had some interesting conversations with with some of the students there, talking about how we could connect with the right and connect with the left. And it's interesting because there's this, as you say, there's this drive for sustainability and local grow your food and have your own garden. If you understand economics, capitalism is the only sustainable system. It's the only way to allocate scarce resources, to not waste it, and through the price system we know, if tomatoes are $1 million, then guess what? Someone's eating too many tomatoes, or however the price system coordinates that information. So if you understand economics, we could kind of, we could connect people with the left on that if they would just kind of understand that it's unsustainable. It has nothing to do with capitalism. It has to do with government intervention.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and the area of business cycle research in particular shows how monetary inflation creates unsustainable bubbles and things. But what troubles me, I guess, most about so many people today is that we live in this world of unbelievable prosperity, and yet people fail to appreciate the cause and effect relationships that are giving us this prosperity. We take it all for granted. I mean, there's some people who walk into Walmart, and instead of seeing a miracle like I see, it really is a miracle. I mean, it conforms to the vision of heaven of many world religions, I mean, from all time. And yet they look at it and go, oh, look at this disgusting display of materialism, and, well, okay, my view is if you don't like materialism, fine. You don't like Walmart, don't shop there, but why deny millions and millions, hundreds of millions of poor people access to a fantastic array of goods and products and food and things at low prices that would have been unthinkable,
and
50 years ago. Say nothing of 1,500 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And when people get upset at Walmart, I guess I can understand where they're coming from. I think they might be misguided because they put out mom and pop shops. Kind of what I try to say is, I don't think Walmart is bad, but even if you do, be mad at the fact that maybe the reason these mom and pop shops don't survive is because they have to comply with a whole host of rules and regulations. They get their faces taxed off. They get taxed through monetary inflation. So, don't be mad at Walmart. Maybe you should be mad at the government that's making it very hard for smaller businesses to survive in this regulatory environment.
Well, I think you raise an interesting point. It's very difficult to do counterfactuals on these kinds of problems. But if you talk to any small business owner today, I mean, just schedule a dinner with one of these men or women and find out about the kind of frustrations they feel. It's they're anxious to serve customers. They're anxious to make good products and bring them to people. But the biggest problems they have are high taxes, government regulations. Makes it almost impossible to hire new employees. Child labor laws are egregious. The minimum wages. I mean, hardly anybody seems to be talking about this stuff anymore. But they've gone up so much in the last 5 years in real terms and in nominal terms that it's priced all young people out of the labor market. So the small businesses can't even get employees anymore. They have to pay these exorbitant wages, and you could say,
kind of heard. I don't. It might just be hearsay, but I live in California, and one of my capitalist pig friends told me that they were thinking of or either it was in the works or they were thinking about of raising the minimum wage to $10 in California, and that could be completely untrue. It might just be hearsay, but I thought that was insane. But I want to ask you about this guy named David Holmgren, who you cited in your article, and this is a guy, he's an author from Australia for our listeners to know, and he writes that technology has been on the wrong track for 500 years.
Yeah, that's right.
He said 500 years ago, when there were 500 million people on the planet, where I can talk to Jeffrey Tucker all the way across the country, 500 years ago, again, there were 500 million people on the planet. So I find that kind of self-explanatory frightening, to be honest, that this guy is pining for 500 years ago. So I'll let you go at it. Just elaborate on what this guy said.
Well, they don't. It's typical of these people that they don't imagine what the implications of what their thought really are. I mean, a technology of 500 years ago is capable of sustaining a population level of 500 years ago and no more. And you pretty much have to kill off everybody else. If you're going to sustain a global population of 7 billion people, on the other hand, you've got to have very sophisticated, very advanced markets just to keep people clothed, fed, and housed. Otherwise, people are going to die off. And look, our lifespans have been expanding dramatically, mostly since the Gilded Age. For all of recorded human history, the average lifespan was between 25 and 35 years. That included a ton of child deaths and was not untypical for most families to have, 2 out of 3 kids die before the age of 5. That was just normal. And now, when we know people that this happens to, it's a profound and an unusual tragedy. But early death was the plight of humanity for most all of human history. But if you're talking about sustaining 7 billion people at any one time, and having lifespans that stretch into the 70s and 80s, you've got to have an extremely sophisticated, market-provided industrial apparatus that is global in nature. Mm-hmm. And no amount of romantic attachments to the way things used to be 500 years ago, whatever, is going to change that.
Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed your humor when you were talking about this guy, because you wrote that David Holmgren criticizing his advocacy. You wrote criticizing his advocacy of local trade and disuse of technology and the division of labor, and you wrote, perhaps there is one benefit to his plan. There's no question that once it is implemented, David Holmgren would no longer be a best-selling author.
Oh, that's for sure.
So comment on this quote, because it's humorous, but there's some real truth and important implications to it that I don't think this guy would even thought about.
It's very difficult to understand how these people don't connect things. I mean, I saw this guy's lecture, in some idyllic garden in Australia or whatever, on YouTube. A technology didn't even exist 5 years ago. I mean, and I saw it I can watch it on my handheld computer, something that wouldn't have been possible 2 years ago. So, yeah, I mean, they're using all the modern tools even while they condemn them. And these people really it's a kind of a religious fantasy. And I must say that the global warming hysteria, which I should change that. It's they're no longer worrying about global warming.
Cooling, right? Yeah.
Well, it's a climate change, just to to make sure that we're safe on both ends of that. Yeah, climate change. But this is also just a kind of a myth spun out of a kind of left-wing paranoia. That somehow Mother Nature is going to strike back at us for having abused her, or and invented the the automobile, or the internal combustion engine, or for extracting oil from Mother Earth, or whatever kind of nutty.
You know what? And to that, there's a group of people who have this kind of romantic point of view, and the idea, like you were just saying, that Mother Earth's going to strike back at us for being naughty, naughty little planet stewards. If any of our listeners are interested, go online and type in Venus Project Stefan Molyneux debate, and Molyneux is spelled Molyneux. And I just watched this 2 days ago. It's a 2-hour debate, and this guy it's just a great debate, and I don't know why that just popped up in my head, because they were talking about the idea that Mother Earth is going to strike back, and Stefan Molyneux is an Austrian. It was just a fantastic debate.
But he's very articulate. I enjoy his material.
He's fantastic, and I just came on to him just not too long ago, and my friend was clamoring at me for so long to do it, and I was just like, yeah, go jump in the lake. But then, because I'm pretty satisfied, reading Mises Org and Lou Rockwell and some other sites, but I mean, he's fantastic. And we have about a minute left, but I'm going to let you get started on this question. Your article cites some interesting real-world examples, and I think this is a great show for our listeners, because you're going to be able to put the accumulated economic knowledge that you have now from listening to our shows, and you're going to be able to see some really great real-world examples of how what the government does in an attempt to make things better just completely messes everything up. And you wrote that the government war on really everything: medicine, chemicals, food, drink, sector after sector. They just keep intervening everywhere. And the incandescent light bulb was your first example. And we're going to discuss what the government has done to the incandescent light bulb right after we come back, because we're coming close to the end of this break. So please stay with us on RadioFreeMarket.com. We're here with Jeffrey Tucker talking about planned poverty. Please stay with us. Hello, America. We are back on Radio Free Market. We're here with Dr. Jeffrey Tucker. Is it doctor or is it Mr.?
No, it's just Mr.
Sir Jeffrey Tucker.
Lord Tucker, right.
Lord Tucker, Lord Privy Tucker. So I'll just let you go at it. Tell us what has the government done to the incandescent light bulb?
Yeah, we can start there. Some as they used to say in the 1950s, pointy-headed bureaucrat, had the idea that fluorescent bulbs are more efficient because they put out much more light relative to heat, whereas incandescent bulbs put out mostly heat rather than light. And from the point of view of the central planners, it's like a no-brainer. We've got to phase out the incandescent and make everybody use these fluorescent bulbs. Well, it turns out that a room full of fluorescent bulbs can be totally oppressive. I mean, inconceivably oppressive, and the fluorescent bulbs don't have the same kind of light. It's sort of light, but it's not really light. It's very troubling on the eye and on the brain, and make your Christmas trees look stupid. And a house full of these things, you just want to, at least for me, maybe it doesn't affect everybody this way, but I'd rather walk around in the dark than deal with these awful things. And they did this in Germany. I think this whole movement against the incandescent bulbs started in Europe. They phased them out completely in Germany, and the public just went crazy with these new bulbs. And so lots of new companies have started marketing the old incandescent bulbs as heat balls. They call them heat balls, and now they're very popular, and people buy heat balls that you can screw in and use. So there's like this, they had to reinvent them and sell them basically in the gray market in order to please the customers. And this is what's happening in the U.S. I mean, this is a kind of a, and I've thought about this a lot. This question of, well, what is this idea of efficiency? So some bureaucrat in Washington is going to tell us what's efficient. Well, what's efficient from their point of view may not be from our point of view. They have decided that bulbs shouldn't put out heat. Well, who's to say? Who's to say a bulb shouldn't also put out heat? And maybe the heat is essential to making the light gentle, functional, beautiful, livable. You wrote that if it were true that the fluorescent lighting is better and it consumes a fraction of the energy, well then by definition it just seems like it's a better product. And would there be a reason to use
violence at all to keep this product off the market? Of course
not.
We
love
it's
better
ridiculous.
products. We love better and better things all the time, so there wouldn't be any force necessary. So the fact that they're having to install this into government regulation, first of all, it implies that somehow there's a market failure at work, which there is not a market failure. I mean, consumers are smart enough to know what kind of bulbs they want to buy. And it secondly implies that they understand that consumers would much rather have old-fashioned bulbs than the new ones. And I'm starting to get worried about this, and I know a lot of people are stockpiling the old incandescent bulbs because they can't live with these fluorescent things. And I understand that. I every time I go to the hardware store and I run across these other bulbs, I feel the impulse to want to stock up too. I don't know if it's
kind of
too
a
early.
Doctor's office, CIA, CIA, interrogation room light. It's very kind of creepy.
Well, I've stared at these fluorescent bulbs for a very long time and looked at them and seen their effects on a room, on what it does to like a page when you're trying to read it, or when they're on a Christmas tree. It's hard to put your finger on exactly what it is, but the light doesn't spread. It's like a lit up thing, but it doesn't quite pervade the room in the same way. It's very difficult for me to put my finger on exactly what's wrong with them. And you notice that there's many headlights that are now being made with fluorescent lighting. I assume this is also a response to government regulations, and it drives me crazy when a car comes up behind me with those fluorescent lights. I mean,
those aren't halogens, are they? Is that completely different?
Yeah, I don't really know a lot about technology, but
I don't know.
Which I should. I mean, I should look into them and figure out what's going on. But you can see it on the highway. Some cars, when they're coming up behind you, their lights don't bother you, and some are very intense and they sort of drill through your brain. So this is another area of research. I'd like to look into this and talk to a car manufacturer and find out what's going on here. Mm-hmm. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. I mean, in terms of household products that have been virtually destroyed by government regulations. The flow of water through our homes, which we think of as being essential to civilization, indoor plumbing. We look back at civilizations and go, well, do they have indoor plumbing or not? I mean, that's a big deal. Well, regulations are making our plumbing work less and less well because they're forcing subdivisions to turn down the water pressure in the name of saving water, and that's ruining our appliances. They're imposing all kind of government regulations on things like dishwashers and clothes washers so that they'll use less electricity, use less water, and guess what? Oh, and also, of course, the water's not nearly as hot because they're destroying our hot water heaters, too. Guess what? Clothes aren't getting clean, dishes are not coming out clean anymore. This is affecting every aspect of life of our homes, and little by little. So we don't always notice it, except like one day we wake up and go, well, why are my socks kind of stinky? Why is that? Maybe it's the detergent I'm using. Oh, and I don't want to even get into detergents because they've also messed up. But everything's connected. They change the water pressure. They regulate the amount of water your appliances can use. They screw around with your hot water heater, so now the hot water doesn't get as hot anymore. You have to hack it. And this
we're coming close to the. We have about 30 seconds left in this segment, but for our listener, you're just going to flip when we start to talk about bed bugs and how some of the things the government has done. Again for the common good, and just because, again, they're pointy-headed bureaucrats. Is that it?
Yeah, that was the 50s term. Yeah.
that's fantastic. And just because they're busybodies and they just can't get enough of control, that they've created an epidemic of bed bugs. And we're going to talk about that in our next segment. Please stay with us on Radio Free Market. We're here with Jeffrey Tucker talking about government intervention. Please stay with us.